If someone attacks your competence in a meeting, most people instantly defend themselves. That is exactly how they lose. The moment you start defending, you've lost the frame. Frame loss means you're arguing inside someone else's architecture. In software engineering, there's a simple law: never trust external input. Systems that accept unverified data become exploited and collapse. The workplace follows the same rule. Your mind is an operating system. Every comment is potential malicious input. Every passive-aggressive remark or loaded question is external data. If you don't validate it, it will corrupt your identity drive. Defensive reactions are the equivalent of executing injected code. Once executed, the attacker controls your process entirely. Today we teach system stability, not snappy comebacks. Welcome to the Workplace Strategy Lab's Firewall Protocol. High-status communicators don't get emotional because the attack never reaches their logical layer. Their firewall identifies the signature and stops the packet. A firewall does not debate a malicious packet. It recognizes the pattern, drops it, and moves on. Your job in a meeting is identical. Detect hostility, refuse to run its routine, and preserve your CPU cycles completely. First defense: input validation. Verify intent before dedicating psychological processing power. Ask yourself, is this a data request or a stress test? Low blows seek to rewrite your system permissions. Treat them as malformed packets and reject them. Example attack. Someone says, "I'm not sure your team can handle this level." It's framed as feedback, but functions as a targeted strike. If you respond by listing achievements, you've validated the malicious input and conceded the frame. Recognize the attacker checks structural integrity, not data. They measure how easily you break under pressure. If you accept the premise, they controlled the protocol. Instead, refuse to process the corrupt query and return to objective parameters. Second mechanism: rate limiting. When attacked, your processor spikes and adrenaline floods the system. Override that default. Implement a mandatory latency. Pause 2 seconds, breathe, then speak 20% slower. This controlled tempo signals absolute bandwidth control. People who are insecure rush speech to fill silence. Slowing down demonstrates you control time and bandwidth. The silence becomes pressure on the attacker. Their malice must now sit within the room, exposed and uncomfortable. That's psychological throttling. Third pillar: signal versus noise. The signal is objective business data. Noise is tone, insults, and politics. A compromised system tries to decode the insult and wastes energy. A high-status firewall ignores noise and processes only measurable signal. Redirecting to documentation is your operational escape hatch. Don't defend honor, defend protocol. Anchor conversations in standard operating procedures, milestones, and agreed objectives. Force critics to argue with documented facts, not your ego. Structural review neutralizes subjective attacks. Understanding the theory is only the first step. To achieve true system stability, we must run this protocol through different environmental stress tests. Let us examine the credit hijack, a highly common vulnerability within corporate communication networks. Imagine you present a successful data model. A rival colleague immediately says, "Yes, that is exactly the foundation my team and I laid out last quarter." They are attempting to overwrite your authorship permissions in real time. If you become visibly angry and say, "You had nothing to do with this," you leak energy. You have allowed their malicious input to trigger a defensive subroutine. You look volatile. They look calm. They win the exchange. Deploy the firewall. Pause. Look directly at them and say, "I reviewed last quarter's documentation during my analysis. Which specific data points from your foundation are you referring to right now?" You are forcing them to provide verifiable data. Malicious actors thrive in ambiguity. By demanding specific documented data points, you shine a spotlight on their empty packet. When they cannot provide the technical specifics, the system naturally rejects their claim without you ever raising your voice. Let us shift to another high-pressure environment. Think of a massive industrial blast furnace. It operates at extreme temperatures, but the external casing remains completely cold to the touch. It contains the intense heat without ever transferring it. Your psychological operating system must function exactly like that heavy industry containment vessel. When a toxic colleague tries to radiate their internal chaos onto you, your external casing must remain absolutely cold. Do not absorb their thermal load. This brings us to a critical safety mechanism, the containment protocol. When someone raises their voice or uses aggressive body language, they are creating a hazardous environment. You do not lower your safety standards to match their chaos. Instead of matching their volume, drop yours. Speak quieter and slower. As their system overheats and loses structural integrity, your system cools down and stabilizes. The stark contrast in the room will immediately highlight their highly erratic behavior. Now, we must address an advanced threat vector. What happens when the malicious input comes from someone with higher administrative privileges? What if the attacker is your direct manager or a senior executive with power over your career? You cannot simply drop the connection on a senior executive. However, you can still filter the input. When a boss attacks your competence publicly, the power dynamic makes defensive reactions even more destructive to your professional standing. Apply the echo validation technique. Repeat their core operational concern back to them, completely stripped of the emotional noise. So, the primary concern here is the timeline efficiency for the fourth quarter. Is that the correct operational parameter? By echoing the operational parameter, you demonstrate high-level listening skills. More importantly, you force the executive to confirm the objective data, effectively neutralizing their own emotional outburst. You manage the manager by structuring their unstructured, chaotic input. Never apologize for a system error you did not commit just to ease the tension. False apologies corrupt your internal log files. Acknowledge the gap in the data, propose a diagnostic plan, but never accept unverified corporate blame. Post-incident analysis is just as critical as real-time defense. After the meeting concludes, do not immediately seek validation from colleagues. Do not gossip about the attacker in the break room. Gossiping is a low-status, unencrypted, and highly vulnerable data leak. A high-status operator records the incident in their internal log and moves on. If the attack violated corporate compliance, document it objectively. Date, time, exact words, and witnesses. Build an impenetrable data trail, not a fragile emotional narrative. Corporate warfare is not won with loud voices or clever insults. It is won through endurance, structural integrity, and the absolute refusal to surrender your psychological bandwidth to unauthorized personnel who refuse to follow standard professional communication protocols. Physical stillness strengthens your firewall. Micro-movements leak energy and telegraph internal disruption. Keep shoulders relaxed, but still maintain steady eye contact and hold a neutral expression. No defensive smiles. Presence without reactivity reads as an impenetrable brick wall. Your attention is your most valuable processing power. When you allow a toxic coworker to occupy your thoughts after hours, you are allowing their malicious code to run in the background, draining your mental battery and compromising your stability. First, quit the application. The moment you leave the office, terminate the corporate network connection. Do not bring the static noise of the workplace into your private sanctuary. Complete system recovery requires total, uncompromising, offline isolation every single night. The modern workplace is an environment of constant friction. There will always be individuals attempting to offload their insecurities onto your network. You cannot control their output. You can only control the strength and configuration of your personal firewall. Stay perfectly calibrated. When they try to provoke you, Recognize the malicious code. When they try to humiliate you, redirect them to the protocol. Let them completely exhaust their resources against your cold, impenetrable, and highly structured exterior. You are not just an employee, you are the architect of your own operational stability. Build it strong, build it cold. Let the rest of the office burn their circuits in meaningless drama while you execute your primary objectives. Implement the firewall protocol starting tomorrow morning. Observe the shift in power dynamics. Watch how quickly the noise fades when it realizes it can no longer penetrate your signal. You dictate the terms of engagement by remaining perfectly still. If you found this tactical breakdown useful, ensure your system is subscribed to the Workplace Strategy Lab. We will continue to decode and debug the corporate environment in future sessions. Stay stable, remain focused, and keep your firewall active.